We, on the other hand, tend to use our feelings as the basis for our identity. And it's the most consistent thing in our worlds, because God knows our thinking isn't consistent. We're all over the map.
Right.
And so very simply, what I do in Driven is make a very strong case where rather than trying to figure out who you are, it's an acceptance of what you are.
Before we get started, have you gotten my free ebook, 10 Quick Tips to Calm the Chaos When You're Feeling Overwhelmed? Go to thesuccess.life/free resource. This ebook will give you 10 quick strategies to calm yourself down, tame the chaos, even in the midst of your challenges. So go now to thesuccess.life/free resource and get your copy today. Welcome to the Intentional Leadership Podcast. This podcast will help you break through the barriers holding you back from the true life of significance you are meant to live. I'm your host, Janelle Bruland, and I invite you to join me each month as I share leadership lessons and specific strategies to transform your leadership, crush your goals, and love your life. As a high-achieving entrepreneur, there was a time when I was overwhelmed doing all of the things and found myself overworked and overcommitted. Through the power of intention, I learned how to shift my mindset and create success habits to achieve a healthy work-life balance and true joy in my life. Now I'm here to help you do the same. Don't just be the CEO of your business, be the CEO of your life. Let's get started. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Intentional Leadership Podcast. I am so excited today to have a very special guest with us, Dr. Doug Brackman. And with 2 PhDs in psychology, Dr. Doug has spent his entire career working with top performers to help them overcome their limiting beliefs, stop their cycle of shame, and achieve the ultimate personal and professional success. Doug has created a new level of framework that's extraordinarily powerful and an invaluable resource for the highly driven, providing insight, understanding, and tools to better leverage one's unique gifts that ultimately results in optimum performance. Welcome, Doug. So excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I am glad to be here.
Wonderful. Well, you wrote the book Driven, Understanding and Harnessing the Genetic Gifts Shared by Entrepreneurs, Navy SEALs, Pro Athletes, and Maybe You. And I read your book and had an opportunity to listen to you speak. And I just thought this would be a great topic for our community to listen to, which are entrepreneurs and business leaders, many of them driven or supporting someone who is driven. So let's talk about your book. Can we start with what is it that compelled you to write this book? How did this come together?
Great question. It's despite what any other psychologist may say, psychologists get into the field of psychology to figure out their own crap. So I wrote the book. It's about me, to tell you the truth, and always felt like I was different, something unique about me. Didn't quite ever feel like I really felt in that second grade, third grade experience where you're sitting in the classroom and quite don't understand why everyone else doesn't see how stupid the traditional school education is. And so it's just like, why don't you people understand what a waste of time this is? And so it led into my own path. It's been, I've struggled early on, with addictions. And in 1991, when I entered graduate school, a Time magazine article came out that said, "We found the alcoholism genes." And it was the first time that I really thought about, that what I am is something genetically different. And the last 33 years has been really understanding. It's just been an amazing time to be a psychologist because the science is catching up with the real understanding of what we are as people. So so I wrote Driven to really tell people that are like me that there's nothing wrong with them. We're supposed to be this way.
I love that. And you talk about the 2 genes, specifically a couple of genes in your book. Tell us about those.
Yeah, so I always give a shout out to Tom Hartman, who originally came up with this hunter-farmer theory. Tom was actually a talk show host, but he had an ADD, ADHD kid, and really explored, from a cultural anthropology or evolutionary psychology perspective, that there must be some reason why his kid was different than the rest. And he made the theory that somewhere along the line, the human species began to adapt to the agricultural revolution. 4,000, 5,000 years ago, the world became a very stable, boring place to live.
Sure.
Yet there's 5%, 8% of the general population that retain the original hunter genetics and the original brain structure that wired us for a different world, that wired us for a much more competitive, much more dangerous, much more chaotic environment.
And what was that percentage again?
So it's somewhere, and it depends upon how you define driven, but it's somewhere between 2% of the general population and about 8% have our brain structure.
Okay.
And so you put us in a functional MRI, and that I took Tom Hartman's theory and actually dove deep into science. And you put us in a functional MRI, and what a functional MRI does is really looks at what part of the brain is being used as dominant or primary.
Okay.
And a normal MRI, a normal functional MRI, for most people, you have a very nice ball of activity on the left prefrontal. And so it's the left prefrontal is the executive function of the brain. And what that does, it teaches and trains the person with this brain structure to see the world as a series of sequential steps, logical, rational, linear. And so if you think about a farmer, they are literally wired to see the world as a simple farming process. You put a seed in the ground, you cover it with dirt, you water it, you patiently wait, and eventually it grows. Then you harvest the growth, you wait for the result, and then you harvest it, and you save some of that for later. And then you do the same thing again and again and again and again and again next year. And that is what creates safety and security. So most people on this planet are wired for a W-2 job. They really do like that assembly line world where if you do what you did yesterday, it's more likely to lead to success tomorrow. And so they are not wired like me.
Right. Structured, comfortable, safe.
And predictable, safe. They're risk adverse. They really like stability and predictability. They don't like change. But if you think about a hunter and you put us in a functional MRI and hunt in this very widely studied research, because there's money in it for attention deficit disorder, you put us in a functional MRI, the back of our heads light up. And so the occipital lobe, and so we use our eyeballs to go through the world. And a byproduct of that is our frontal lobe, rather than having a nice central kind of ball of activity, we have little dots of energy all over the place. And so what I call that is multi-thinking. The normal farmer or, the typical person, when you you give them a task, they will break it down into 2 or 3 different things.
Sure.
You put us in a task, we will see it as 9 or 10 or 12 different things. So literally we are seeing the world in a much more complex way. And, as a byproduct of that, we have big picture thinking. We see the big picture rather than the linear picture. And attention deficit disorder doesn't mean that we can't pay attention. It's we pay too much attention. And so we see all of the opportunity in front of us. And so if you think about that as an entrepreneur, that's great. You see all the different options and you see how complex things work together. But you put us in a cubicle and tell us to do the same mundane tasks every day, we lose our minds.
Yes, that's certainly true. Well, that reminds me, in your book, you talk about for the hunter, for the driven, where if you're a rabbit that's born in an environment where there's hawks everywhere, you're naturally wired for danger.
Yep.
And we're now our world is more rabbits born in an environment where there aren't hawks everywhere, but the driven are still wired to be looking for the hawks.
Constantly, yeah, it's a hyper vigilance. We put the hyper in the vigilant part. And so you think about, what the world was like 10, 15, 20,000 years ago. It was a much more dangerous place.
Right.
And, you create this the world has never been safer than it is today. It really is. Our healthcare systems, the likelihood of you or I dying in a war is almost zero. I mean, it's crazy safe. And
True.
so if we're a hunter in a farmer's world, we feel out of place, we look out of place, we're workaholics, and we're the Navy SEALs, and we're the professional athletes. We are the ones who are hyper achieving.
Right.
It goes into the genetics, and the genetics are really what gets people into my world, because you have two primary genetics around this, and both are around dopamine. So dopamine is an anticipatory reward. So I'm hoping something's going to feel good, is what it does. And dopamine number two, when that dopamine receptor, D2-A1 allele gene, big fancy word, but very simply, it's the boredom gene. And so when you have this genetic, we feel this kind of achy, weird sense that there's something missing or wrong when we don't have enough stimuli around us. Going to the hunter-farmer theory, very simply, if farmers felt this while they're sitting there watching their crops grow, they would wander away.
Right, exactly.
But if we as hunters didn't feel this when we're sitting on our butts in the cave, we would never go out and scavenge. We would never want to get out of the cave. And so it suits us as drivens, this boredom, we are very intolerant of doing nothing. So that part of it, a little bit more interesting genetics, because it applies to me more so than the hyperactivity. But people who have that DRD2 tend to be much more ADHD with the hyperactivity. They need to get stimulation in the present.
Sure.
Me, on the other hand, and most of this varies too, is dopamine receptor number 4. And that's the FOMO gene. That's the fear of missing out gene. And if you think about hunters, hunters are wired to feel like there's always more opportunity over the next hill. There's more woolly mammoths over there. And as a hunter, if we didn't feel that, we would kill all the game around us and starve. And so we are National Geographic did a great exploration of people with this genetic, and they call it the wandering gene. This is why a lot of us love to travel and love to feel like, like there's more opportunity around the next bend.
Yes, yes. And that can be an incredible strength, because if you are wired with that driven gene, you are wired to achieve. You always want to be able to do more. And then you can accomplish a lot. You can do great things in the world. But where the tipping point comes, and you talk about this in your book, is this drive to constantly do more and more. And this tends to be the main thing I help entrepreneurs with, is when they've gone to that other side and they've blown things up, they're completely out of balance, they're overworked, they're burnt out, and they end up really creating damage in different areas of their life, because you talk about the hypervigilant, the ability to be so focused, and then you're not, and then you are, and you can get so deeply focused on one particular thing, say a work thing you're wanting to do, that your family blows up over here, or you completely forget about your health. So
yeah, and
talk about that piece.
So the self-psychology, and that's something else I'm very passionate about, is identity. And so you think about a farmer's identity, and just going back 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 years, we were in hunter-gatherer groups of 40, maybe 50 people. very fluid identities, very much Da Vinci's. We could build a tent, we could make a fire, we could do all of these different tasks. But as societies went from hundreds to thousands to millions, and the brain structure became more and more linear.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is, that we became butchers and bakers and candlestick makers. That we became much more specialized and much more limited.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as a cobbler, as long as I make shoes and I make shoes every day, that is what I am and what I do. And it's a very simple structure.
Sure.
Where drivens, and this is why I caution most of my drivens to be careful going into a normal or a typical psychologist's office, because we look crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They ask us who we are, and it's like, what do you mean, who am I? Like, well, I'm a dad, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm all of those things at the same time. And the genetics behind our reward system. And you think about what boredom is, and it's one of the most consistent things in my world, is feeling like, there's something missing or wrong, and we can make an identity out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And meaning that there's something missing or wrong with me.
Right.
And that is why driven suffer, from the imposter syndrome, is a very common understanding that, despite all of my success on the outside, I still feel like I'm not enough on the inside.
Sure. There's a disconnect between the inner and the outer world.
You got it. And that propels people to death. And that's workaholism and all of this. If I achieve enough on the outside, maybe, hopefully, this feeling on the inside might go away.
Mm-hmm.
That's my joke I always say about, Dr. Jim Spira, my dissertation chair, first one to ever call me doctor, shook my hand. Congratulations, Dr. Brackman. My inner world experience was, literally, I heard it in my head, haha, he bought it. Because that feeling that I was hoping would go away, of, maybe I'll feel smart enough, it was reward deficient. I did not feel that, oh God, I feel great, maybe for a flash.
Right.
And it immediately dissipates. And so that is where workaholism and a lot of the things that you help your audience with is devastating.
Right. You talk about in the book about climbing a pole, and that there's just another pole to climb and another pole to climb. And I know that for myself, similar feelings. I mean, I agree with you, and everything that you're saying is I've had times in my life where I've accomplished a lot. I made this goal and it feels really great. And then it's like, okay, now what? And there needs to be another thing. And there always has to be this other thing. And it does feel like there's got to be something wrong with you, because nobody else seems to really get it. And how do you?
It comes down to identity. And that is what the gift I give all my drivens very quickly is a rapid change in their identity. And most people and farmers do not struggle with identity like we do. They are doctors, they're lawyers, they're this, they're that, and they have a very clear scripted idea of what that means.
Sure.
We, on the other hand, tend to use our feelings as the basis for our identity. And it's the most consistent thing in our worlds, because God knows our thinking isn't consistent. We're all over the map.
Right.
And so very simply, what I do in Driven is make a very strong case where, rather than trying to figure out who you are, it's an acceptance of what you are.
I love that.
What you are as a monkey, what you are as a Homo sapien, what you are as an animal. Period, full stop. You're not your feelings, you're not your thoughts, you're not your achievements, you're not your labels. And most drivens go, oh, okay. And it's a simple, stake in the ground that we can anchor everything else on.
And I like it too that you said that, just coming to that self-acceptance, that it's a beautiful thing how we've been created, and we are wired to achieve. We're wired to want more, and we can turn that, if we just reframe that into, we just want to keep learning and growing. And what a beautiful thing that is, because with that, because we want to keep learning and growing and exploring, we can change the world, and we can use those gifts rather than, I think, this comparison to other people in our life that just think we're a little nuts. And then we think maybe we are.
And it's literally what I do in Driven is, I am an animal and I am driven. And because I'm driven, I'm 3%, 5% of the population. And, my next book is titled Sheep, Wolves, and Shepherds.
Oh,
And most people are sheep, and we need the sheep. We need employees.
absolutely.
And they are just as valuable to us as we are to them.
Mm-hmm.
They need us too, because we are the ones founding companies and starting companies and that they need to work at.
Right.
And the gift that we give them, is easily misperceived though by them, because we scare the crap out of the sheep. We really do.
Especially when we do things like this and come back with all the new ideas. Yeah.
And make changes too rapidly in the company. And that is, oh my God, I got the greatest idea. And all the sheep go,
and everybody's, no. She's not coming back from a conference again. Oh no.
Because the change scares them.
Yes.
Where we see change as a necessity for opportunity. And it's not, and both are true.
Sure. Well, and it's why, all the beautiful people in the world, we're all unique in our own way. And if we understand each other better, we can just support the other, because we all need each other. Like you say, it's not, drivens can't rule the world. We have to be the hunters, the farmers all have to come together. And the more we can understand each other, which I think this is a beautiful thing in what you've written here, to just help driven people understand why they are. Wanted to shift gears a little bit. You talked about the mind of the driven, especially. And one of the things I teach on a lot is the monkey mind, and the fact that, it just seems, and many of us, not even just driven, but many of us deal with this constant mind chatter. And you talk about the monkey and the elephant.
Oh, great.
Can you talk more about that? I thought that was really a helpful way to understand this struggle that's going on within us.
So we have basically two operating systems trying to make sense of this very weird experience we have being alive. It is a very strange thing when you like, holy crap, I'm alive. We have one below the nose that is very simply very old. It's a billion-year-old recording device. And so it's constantly recording our experiences. It's the hippies who are right, trauma's recorded in the body.
Okay.
Then you have another system above the nose that is constantly comparing past to future. And so the one below the nose is wired very differently and wants a different set of goals than the one above the nose. The one below the nose, and this was my doctoral dissertation, wants a familiar, predictable world. It wants to know where all the landmines are. It wants to know the threats. It wants to know the things that could hurt me.
Sure.
The one above the nose is a time machine that is constantly comparing what's happening below my nose in my body and running through patterns and scenarios and all of these opportunities and threats.
Mm-hmm.
And so seeing them as two separate systems, and this is my doctoral dissertation, you have, and the Buddha observed a long time ago, 2,500 years ago, that we are very much like an Indian elephant with a whole bunch of monkeys up on top trying to control it.
Okay, that's a great picture.
An elephant so with the monkeys
on top.
The Indian elephant seems to have a mind of its own, that it is leaning one way or the other, but most of the time we believe that we actually have control over this elephant. And my doctoral dissertation looked at, lots of things around self-sabotage. Okay. And why does January suck at the gym? You go to the gym in January, there are tons of people everywhere.
Right.
what happens in February, March, April? So
They stop going even by the end of January. You just have to wait them out. And
and
then
so
the gym gets quieter again.
what is really going on there is a demonstration of the two different operating systems.
Mm,
You have this elephant that is going along for the ride. The monkey mind has convinced the elephant that this time's going to be different. I can go to the gym. I'm going to get my 6-pack of abs.
okay.
But what the elephant eventually starts to experience is health. It starts to feel better. And it's more importantly, it starts to experience change, and it doesn't want change.
Okay.
It wants the familiar. And so it starts to resist going to the gym. And that triggers the monkey mind to either come up with a big, mean gorilla and beat the shit out of the elephant and go to the gym. Or you got these other little elephants up or monkeys up there telling you, oh, you can go later, you can do this, you can do that.
Right. You don't have to go. You
And
can
so
stay home today.
that interaction between the monkeys and the elephant is, and I also looked at lottery winners, and my entrepreneurs that, exit their companies are basically lottery winners.
Mm.
Most lottery winners, 80% of lottery winners within 3 to 5 years are broke and their family hates them.
Ah.
Why? Because it's so unfamiliar to the elephant.
Good point.
And so entrepreneurs and all of that, and I see that very often in my practice where, they come up with the great idea, they get to a certain point of success, and then they sabotage it. They make change. I came up with another idea. But it's really the elephant, sabotaging you, going back to the familiar level of chaos and the familiar level of threat.
Because that's comfortable.
Because that's comfortable.
Okay.
And so the Buddha question is always, which one are you? Where's Janelle in that? Where's Doug in that? Are you the monkey mind or are you the elephant?
And who's in charge?
Great question. So that is, and the look on your face, and I do it in Driven, I do it in the book, is the answer is obviously both, and capital A-N-D underlined neither. Yeah, there's that look on your face, that neither piece is the way they've talked about it for 40, 50,000 years is we have a mind, we have a body, and then we have a soul. And it's that third element that allows us to observe the monkey mind and see the cheerleaders and see the gorillas and see and also experience the impulsive elephant and give us a pause on both and giving you the opportunity to change. And so it is that third element where, and that's the joke I always say too, is that if anyone ever tells you they really have it figured out about what the soul is, run, because they're trying to get you in a cult. So,
oh dear.
But it's very simply that who is really in charge of me? And, being able to get to the point where you can really ask yourself with honesty and curiosity, what am I doing? Without the joke, what are you doing? No, it's wait a second, what am I doing? And it's in that space that all change happens. And as you say, I've got umpteen $1 million in the bank, and yet I'm starting another company. What am I doing? And I got a little kid at home, and I need to work more. And it's that, what am I doing? And as I teach drivens are famous for 3 basic areas of life: finance, romance, and health. You have always one optimized, one that's kind of okay, and one that you're ignoring. And from the soul level or from that curious level, you can actually optimize all of them.
Right.
And
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think it is about getting to that deep part of yourself and that spirit within you. And I really believe that God created us all with this purpose, and we have these amazing minds and bodies and souls. And we have to get to that deeper part of ourselves and really understand
understand us deeply. And I think that that's what you talk about in the book, which is great. I mean, we all are different, and it's a good thing. And the way we've been wired genetically, there's beautiful things there. And then we're aware of those things that get us off track, that are going to take us, in the case of the driven, to this constant achievement where we never feel like we're enough. And you just got to get back to that heart and soul of what's in you and what really matters.
And that is the gift of being driven, is that you have to do this work. If you don't do this work, you use your feelings to make these decisions, you are on a constant treadmill, never getting there, because you're chasing something that isn't real.
Right.
Where, I believe, that we are on this planet to really shepherd the sheep. And we are, called to that, and the difference between someone who is driving sheep and how a driver is, they are behind the herd of sheep and they got a big stick and they're yelling and they're screaming and they're telling them which way to go.
Right.
Where the shepherd is actually in front of the herd and leading the sheep to greener pastures. And so I think
that's beautiful.
For driven, we are truly called to that, but it's very easy to get frustrated with sheep and yell at them. So I mean, it's, are you a shepherd or a driver as the leader of your organization? And that is something that this next book I'm working on is diving into.
And that's so important. I remember a really pivotal moment as I was leading my company, and it was in the middle of the recession in 2009. And it was like overnight, all of a sudden the world changed and everybody was concerned, what's happening next? And nobody knew what was going on. There was just a lot of fear. We had our business drop 30% overnight, jobs canceled. I had a facility management company and a number of people that worked under me. And I am typically a really optimistic person. I'm the visionary of the company and leading people forward, had a wonderful team around me. And there was a time, because I was talking to colleagues at that time that had been really successful and they were going out of business, or they just had all of a sudden this immense fear, and it was catchy. And I remember I went into the office and I led a meeting during that week. And I brought my own fear into the office and into that meeting. And we came out of that meeting, and one of my managers, who we had a really good relationship, and he was able to say things directly to me. And he pulled me aside and he said, Janelle, you're always the one that puts the wind in our sails, but you can also take it out. Yep. And it just was so compelling to me. And I thought, he's right. How I show up really matters as the leader of this organization. And I know that that's a heavier burden to carry, but you know what? If we were born with these leadership gifts, if we've been given these genetic traits, then that is our responsibility to lead in a way that helps to inspire others and to be their best. I mean, I just think, sorry guys, that's the calling, that's the mantle, and step in, step up, and wear it.
Yeah, exactly. And and again, going back to the beginning of this, it's just what we are. And by default, I see this in driven, we are put in positions of leadership, even if we don't want them.
Right, that's true. That's true.
Because we have that natural ability to actually see the big picture that, the farmers don't. They know that on some level. And that ability to actually just embrace what we are. And then, as you say, hone those skills and really find, that it is a gift. It's not a curse.
Right.
And to whom much is given, much is expected.
I agree. I agree completely. And you talk about one of the ways that we self-sabotage ourselves. I know when I went through that experience and was called out by my manager, I remember going away from that and really beating myself up, which I think we're really good at. And you talk, I think, in fact, you dedicate a whole chapter to it, is about shame. And that's something and not only for people that are driven, but I think all of us deal with that to a certain extent, where we can allow shame to really permeate and take over. And talk a little bit about that, and what we should do with that
And
emotion.
yeah, shame gets a real bad rap, but without shame, there's no society.
Mm,
And so you need shame to have, if I hurt you, I feel bad. And
right.
that
True.
is what keeps the glue in society together. But the difference with that versus I hurt you, I am bad,
Mm,
where I'm making an identity out of those deeper feelings. And
good point.
that is something that drivens do really well. And that
Huh.
is where narcissism and all this, I am good, and we get very defensive. You want to make a driven person cuckoo is accuse them of being a wolf when you're really trying to be a shepherd. You
Oh,
know, and
yeah.
that there's something you're bad and I know you're bad and I don't want to hear it. And because it triggers that deep core sense that I might be really broken because I
Mm,
feel broken, and you might
sure.
see that. And that, is why these genetics are also part of the addiction spectrum. And a
Mm,
lot of us go into addictions to numb that, to get out of it, or, workaholism, I must achieve, I must, perfectionism, all of those things can be really unhealthy ways to deal with this core sense that I am broken.
mm,
And so how to deal with those feelings is literally not make an identity out of them. And, you renegotiate and you work on your emotional intelligence to where you can see that these bad feelings are there because I'm a good person.
right.
If I hurt you and I feel bad, that makes me good. So
That's a good thing. Sure.
and
Sure.
so it's really engaging this, psychological mindedness, or, as I do in Driven, really a mastery sense, that I'm constantly in a state of getting better.
Mm-hmm.
There is no finish line, and I want to become aware of the mistakes I make so I can actually improve.
Right. No,
Believe that
I like
Driven,
that a lot.
we are wired for mastery. It is what, mastery is, that sense that there is no finish line.
Mm,
Better has no finish line. And
that's beautiful. And those emotions, I really like what you said, is those emotions are good things. And it's good that we're aware of them. I mean, that's the first step to mastering them, realizing that it's something we're feeling. That doesn't mean it's who we are. We just have to, we're feeling shame because of this. And then identify the why. And we may need to say we're sorry to someone. It's helping us recognize something, and that's the first step.
yep. And it's don't make an identity out of it. That's
Right.
the,
Right.
I'm an animal, I'm a Homo sapien, and I have this biology, and I have these sensations in my body, and they are triggered because it's rather than who do they think I am, who do I think all of that is just a path to hell for driven people.
Mm-hmm. No, that's certainly true. One of the things that resonated with me in the book, you had the quote at the beginning of one of the chapters of iron sharpens iron. And I mentioned I have a leadership mastermind of entrepreneurs where that's actually our mantra, and getting people together who can sharpen each other. And you talk about the importance of driven individuals coming together with other like-minded people, and why? Why is that really important?
Yeah, it's essential, critical for a host of reasons. Um, Say it this way: one of the things I'm talking about in the new book is, what happens to a herd of sheep or a herd of gazelles when a cheetah runs into them? They scatter.
Scatter. Yeah, they run.
Screw you, and you're on your own. Good luck with that cheetah. I'm out of here. That is what, and the world is wired that way.
Sure.
We're drivens, hunters. We are wired much more like a wolf pack. What happens when a bear attacks one of the wolves in the wolf pack?
They
All
all
of the
protect.
wolves, yeah, we kick its ass. And so I've got your back. I've got your back. And as driven people, I worked a lot with Navy SEALs, and I've worked a lot with, military. We seek those deep, real, strong connections. But most of the guys I work with, and I'm sure you come across the same thing, and gals, we have been burned by farmers so many times that we give up on people. Like no one really has my back. And until you get into a group of drivens where people can really start to understand that, whoa, we're different. We are different. I will have your back. And that bonding connection, the masterminds, and that is so essential for us to feel like we're not crazy.
Right.
And feel like somebody really does have our back in this world.
Yes.
And we
gets
are
us.
deeply need to be understood and deeply need to feel like we belong to that wolf pack. Once it happens, and I work a lot with startups, and it is an unfair advantage, a ridiculously unfair advantage when a C-suite or the leadership team in an organization really does have each other's back. But to demonstrate that, I have to be willing to really risk telling you the truth.
Sure.
And I have to be willing to hear the truth. And that is that iron sharpens iron, to where it is, I'm willing to do the harder thing and willing to let you do the harder thing and hear it. But once you get on the other side and you get into that mastery model, that I'm doing this to make you better, and I'm, telling you this to make you better,
right,
then it becomes infectious, and you get hopefully addicted to really developing relationships that just build each other up. And as driven, we're wired for that. It is why we're on this planet. I truly believe that.
Well, and once you understand yourself, that this is who you are, you have this constant drive to get better, this constant improvement. So once you buy into that and really accept that as who you are, the getting in better and better piece comes when you're with other like-minded people who are willing to call you out on your stuff, and you're willing to do it to them. And because you've developed this trust with them, you're willing to hear that, because and you get deeply that it's just going to help you be better, which is exactly the cycle that you want to be on, just continuing to get better and better.
But as drivens, we're 3%, 5% of the population. And being able to find like-minded people is, thank God for the internet now, and thank God for these friends, because my second grade, third grade experience is, that feeling like I'm different and feeling like no one really has my back led to my addictions, and leads to to just isolation and not happiness. I mean, it leads to really feeling empty.
Yeah, understandable. So if, for my listeners in the audience who have a driven in their life that maybe they relate more to, they like the structure, they're the stabilizing spouse or partner at work, that you're supporting a driven, how can we who are not driven support somebody who is?
Understanding. I mean, you want to make a driven really bond with you, is seek to understand how different they are and start to value those differences rather than get scared by them. It is because we can be impulsive, scary, judgy people, and where we're not judging, it's more that we're just not understanding you.
Sure.
And so when I get non-drivens, or and it is a spectrum, it's a continuum, it's not black or white.
Right.
But for the spouses, understanding how important you are to anchoring the crazy driven in your life and bringing that stability, because it is your world, it's not our world. It's our world. It would be too chaotic and crazy. And it would be, but in seeing how valuable you are to them and owning your own value, and even though they may not appreciate it, they will once you can start to appreciate them. So it's a reciprocal, and we need you as much as you need us.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's great. Anything else that's top of mind for you that we didn't cover that you would like to talk about?
I say this to all of my if you're hearing this for the first time and it starts to make sense to you that In chapter 1, I say it 100 times, is that you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You're supposed to be this way. Those feelings of being different, and different is good. And, trying to undo this and trying to just be normal or fit in is not why you're here. This is a gift.
That's great. Well, for any of you listening who haven't yet read the book, I highly recommend it. If you feel that you're driven, or you know somebody in your life that's driven, it is just going to be huge for you. It looks like this. And Doug, can you tell us where we can get your book, and then also how our listeners can connect with you directly if they would like to?
So to find me, it's simple. It's iamdriven.com.
Okay.
And that you can find links to the book and links to podcasts and all kinds of stuff about me. And then I have an assessment on there if you're curious about it. And it is a spectrum. Not all drivens are created equal. There's I have 9 or 10 different traits on my assessment, and it'll show you how you're different from your friends, and it's good stuff.
Great. Well, this has been really fun and such an interesting talk. And Doug, I just thank you so much for being on today. We just loved having you on the Intentional Leadership podcast. And I know that our listeners are going to find a lot of value in this. And everybody go check out this book and Doug's website, and we'll have the link for you to be able to go directly there and take his assessment if you'd like. It's really fun. I did, and you can learn something about yourself. And anyway, go ahead and have a wonderful day. Go out and serve the world with the light that you have and the gifts that you've been given.
Thank you for joining me today on the Intentional Leadership Podcast, where you will learn how to transform your leadership, crush your goals, and love your life. Each episode, I will teach you something to take your life and leadership to the next level. Then at the end, I will challenge you to take action on what you have learned. If you're enjoying this podcast, will you please take a moment to leave a positive review? This helps get the message out to impact as many people as possible. And please subscribe to this podcast. That way the episodes will drop each time a new one comes out. Remember, when you grow as a leader, your team will grow and your company will grow. You can transform your leadership, crush your goals, and love your life.